The spiritual war that we fight every day is very real, and the video you're about to watch will prove as evidence of that. All right, folks, let's get into this one, and I have to tell you, this one is unbelievable. But look, I want to say this right from the very beginning, because we're going to get into Romans chapter 12 in just a second. We might even get into a portion of Romans chapter 16, because it speaks very vividly to the subject that we're going to get into. But the title of the article we're going to go over is Iran Paid Anti-Israel Protesters in America, U.S. government says. By the way, this is the United States government that's disclosing this. And the reason why this becomes very significant is because it reveals to us so many of the things that are happening in the spiritual world, the world that so many people don't even see or know or understand. And the reason why the spiritual war is being waged in the way that it is so effectively is because so many people don't even realize that there is one. They don't see the fact that it exists. And perhaps the greatest tactic of the devil himself is to get you to believe that there is no war, thus becoming one of the very first casualties of the war that you're actually in. I think it's a tactic that has been known to us for a long time, and that is when there's any type of a warfare engagement, the ones that will lose the fastest, the ones that will be destroyed, perhaps in the most significant way, are the ones that don't even realize they're in a war. And so it's easy to pick them off, and that's exactly what the devil is doing. He does not want us to be excellent in the things that are good, because the more excellent we become in the things that are good, the more aware we become of the very things that are happening around us. And this article is such a powerful and vivid picture of that very principle, okay? And by the way, what we're going to read about with respect to what Iran is doing with the United States shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, but it should serve as a very powerful reminder of how important it is for us to be thinking about the spiritual realm and to be engaging in the spiritual realm and recognizing what the spiritual realm is actually, what's happening in the spiritual realm and the tools that God has given us to fight in that way. Ephesians chapter 6 tells us this, right? That we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. The picture is very, very obvious. And so we know this. We should continue to understand it. Colossians chapter 1 makes that very clear to us. Like when you start to begin to go through that passage, the declaration that is made right there is very, very, very important. Colossians is a spiritual warfare type of a book. So we get these ideas, they're very clear, and then it becomes very obvious when you read stories like this. Let me read this to you. This is really interesting. It says this. It says the director of national intelligence, by the way, just so you know, the DNI is a person that a lot of people don't necessarily know about. A lot of people don't even really think is of any significance, but they're a big deal. Okay, just so you understand that the director of national intelligence has a lot to do with a lot of the clandestine operations that are happening, not just nationally, but all over the world. And there's some very, very interesting things that come out of their office. But let me read this to you. It says the director of national intelligence, Avril Haines, says the U.S. intelligence community has, quote, observed actors tied to Iran's government posing as activists online, seeking to encourage protests and even providing financial support to protesters. That's no joke, folks. Let me go on to read the next paragraph. It says, Haines made the disclosure in a July 9th, 2024 press release. She said it was for the purpose of, quote, informing the public of foreign affairs to influence our democratic processes. This is her quote. She goes on to say, in recent weeks, Iranian government actors have sought to opportunistically take advantage of the ongoing protests regarding the war in Gaza. Haines goes on to say, this is the quote, Americans who are being targeted by this Iranian campaign may not be aware that they are interacting with or receiving support from a foreign government. Folks, do you understand how significant that quote is? Let me read it to you one more time. Americans who are being targeted by this Iranian campaign may not be aware that they are interacting with or receiving support from a foreign government. Guys, Iran is deeply embedded and rooted within the culture of Islam. Let me read to you something that the Quran says, because I'm going to drive a point home with this that I think we all need to listen to. It's super critical that we see this. The Quran says this. I'm going to read it to you in Arabic and then I'm going to translate it What it means, I've read it to you guys so many times before. This is in 354. It says this. It says, وَمَكُرُ وَمَكُرَ اللَّهُ وَاللَّهُ خَيْرَ الْمَكَرِينَ. What it basically means is they deceived. By the way, referring they is an indirect reference to the Jews. So Allah deceived. Why? Because Allah is the chief of deceivers. Folks, Allah is the chief of deceivers. Think about that statement for just a second. What is the formal title on Iran? The Islamic Republic of Iran. The Islamic Republic of Iran. Folks, the premise of Islam, according to its own book, is deception. Allah is the chief of deceivers, and they worship Allah, and they're very militant about their worship of Allah. Iran is a deceiving nation. That's what they do. And one of the core tenets of deception, especially the type of deception that the enemy uses against us, is to cause us to understand that what we are dealing with has nothing to do with what is really happening. In other words, they want us, the enemy wants us to believe that we are not in a war or middle of a war that is actually raging and that stands to destroy us. You got it. These very protesters that believe they are standing for something that is principled and important are actually being manipulated in the dark by the devil himself. Think about that for a second, folks. I think it's critical that we wake up to recognizing the spiritual tactics of the devil who hates us. You want to know why he's called the enemy? Because he is the enemy of our souls. He hates us. He will do anything that he can to destroy us. Look at the next paragraph. It says the U.S. intelligence community typically functions separately from law enforcement, but in the past, some federal prosecutors have brought cases about attempted Iranian influence on American public opinion. Like, it's gotten to the point where they're actually looking at that, folks. They want to actually take it to court. President Biden pardoned one such figure in 2023 as part of a deal to obtain the release of American hostages held by Iran. Okay, so let's get this straight. So a man is used in a massive ring of deceiving Americans into destroying themselves. He gets caught, he gets tried, he gets convicted, and then he gets pardoned by the President of the United States in order to release a hostage, and then on top of that, gives Iran billions of dollars. Yeah, we got a problem, folks. And I can tell you this right now. The problem of the president's cognitive ability has nothing to do with how calculated these actions are. His handlers are doing all of this, and the greatest of all of his handlers is the one who inspires them all, the devil. Why do you think the Biden regime is so good to Iran? They're really good to Iran because they all work for the same commander-in-chief, the devil himself. And many of them might not even be aware of the fact that the devil himself is manipulating them, just like Iran is doing this with a lot of Americans. Look what it goes on to say. It says Haynes, a Biden appointee who was Deputy National Security Advisor during the Obama administration, took care not to portray all anti-Israel protesters as Iranian dupes. She goes on to say, this is her quote, "I want to be clear that I know Americans who participate in protests are in good faith expressing their views on the conflict in Gaza. This intelligence does not indicate otherwise. Moreover, the freedom to express diverse views when done peacefully is essential to our democracy." By the way, it's not a democracy, it's a republic. But she goes on to say, but it is also important to warn of foreign actors who seek to exploit our debate for their own purposes. And I actually think she's right here. I don't think that she's wrong in saying what she's saying. The reality of it is, if an American wants to express their view on something that's going on with respect to foreign policy or something that's happening around the world or something that's going on, that's fine. The problem is these are not informed positions. As a matter of fact, these positions that are being taken are actually manipulated positions. These are positions that are being controlled by foreign actors who absolutely hate your guts. And I think it's really funny of these people running around going, free Palestine. And the terrible part about this is they're being manipulated by the people that hate them. And they want to free what they call freeing a group of people that also hates them. But that's how the devil works. Folks, do you get how it works? the devil will use you, and the moment he's done using you, he'll just destroy you. He'll throw you away like a piece of trash. That is what the devil does, and he's very, very good at doing that. As a matter of fact, we talked about this as we were going through the book of Revelation, as we've been going through chapter 20. We've been having this discussion. The devil is good at using you, and then after he exploits you, throwing you away. It's heavy. We did that, talked about that extensively when we went through Revelation chapter 20. I want to say right in verses 7 through 11. And we can put that study up right here. Yeah, right there. We can post it right there. Well, yeah, is it right there? Yeah, we'll put it up right there. Anyway, there's a lot happening that we have to look at here. We have to recognize and understand that this is a powerful tactic of the enemy, and he's been doing this for thousands of years. That's why he's so good at it, folks. He's really good at it. Haynes said she'd be offering more updates on foreign influence efforts as the 2024 campaign season progresses. It's getting ugly, folks. It's getting ugly. And as we get to November, it's going to get even more ugly because the devil is good at this. Absent from the statement was any explanation about what the U.S. government is doing to try to stop the Iranian meddling. Has it tried to shut down bank accounts or social media accounts that the Iranians are using? Has it conveyed diplomatic message through the embassy of Switzerland or through the other channels to Iran to cut it out? Let me ask another question. Have they just gone into the direct talks with Iran that they've been having on a regular basis to undermine Israel and maybe talked about that? No, they're not doing it. They're not doing it because they're just as duped. It's crazy. Look what it goes on to say. It says a foreign policy official who served in the Reagan, George W. Bush, and Trump administration, Elliot Abrams, has a post up on his Council on Foreign Relations blog calling out the ineptitude of the Biden administration in Middle East diplomacy, writing, here's the quote, "As I have watched U.S. diplomacy since October 7th, the phrase that has kept on coming back to me is Casey Stengel's after his 1962 Mets racked up a modern record of 120 losses. Can anybody here play this game?" Oh, man. The quote goes on to say, "Isn't it obvious that as between Iran and the world's greatest superpower, Iran, not the United States, should be afraid of escalation?" Abrams writes, "The record is clear that the Iranian leadership shies away from confrontation with the United States. So why are our diplomats expressing the greater fear of escalation?" That's right. That's a very, very, very astute observation. Russia's meddling in the 2016 election spawned endless investigations and news articles and accusations. It'd be strange if the disclosure of Iranian activity in the U.S. in the midst of the 2024 campaign falls to arouse similar levels of concern. That's kind of heavy when you think about it, but this is the way that the devil works, folks. He does this. He's very, very, very good at this, and he continues to get better and better and better. He causes people to think completely differently. And I think that this is something that we have to wake up concerning. I think it's something that we have to be aware of. Folks, this seems so unbelievable, but you have to understand there's a much more significant picture here. There's a bigger picture. There's a picture that we have to wake up to, because the understanding that comes when we are used this way, when the enemy comes and deceives us into thinking something that we should not be thinking, or looking at something that we shouldn't even be really paying much attention to, drives us to a place where we end up becoming misdirected because we don't understand our purpose. We don't understand our call. We don't understand what God has designed for us and created for us. And we live in a world that is filled, and I mean filled, with deception. And when we continue to give ourselves to that deception, we continue to believe the lies that are designed to destroy us, the lies that are designed to rip us off of every wonderful and good thing that God has created for us. And the reality of it is, the more we allow ourselves to be given to that, the more we continue to bring ourselves in that place where we walk away from all of those wonderful things. But here's the hope. God has great plans for us. God wants to do wonderful things. And it starts by you just simply saying, I want Christ into my heart. Listen, I can tell you this right now. Half the battle, more than half the battle, all of the battle is when you say, Lord Jesus, I trust you for my salvation. Because when he takes residency in your heart, you know what he begins to do? He begins to awaken you on the inside. You begin to have discernment. You begin to see things in the invisible that you were never able to see. And it begins to really cause you to think differently of all of the things that you confront on a day-to-day basis. And it's interesting because when you come to know the Lord, Now you're given a new mission. See, the problem that we're having right now with these younger kids is they're looking for purpose. They're looking for an opportunity to be a part of something bigger. They want to be able to make a difference with their voices. And in many cases, they're being manipulated to think that the only way they can do something where they are making a difference is to be part of a much larger collective. They're not thinking about the idea that God himself can use them individually to make a mark in the world that they never thought they could make. They never realize it. I think oftentimes we think that way. We think, oh, well, God can use him or God can use her, but he can never use me. And there's no way in the world that we'll ever see anything like that happen because, well, I'm just different. People don't like me. I have a weird personality. Folks, let me just tell you something. People love to hate me. I'll tell you something about me personally. People love to hate me. I am polarizing. I mean, there are some people that really love me, but there's a lot of people that don't like me. They don't like my voice. They think I'm arrogant. They think I'm loud. They think I'm proud. All that. I don't want to call myself loud and proud. You know what I mean? Anyway, but the whole point is there's a lot of folks that really, really don't like me. And it's very easy for me to say, yeah, I'm not a popular person. I was never a popular kid in high school. Popularity is not my thing. I don't blend in well with people. There's no way God could use me. Want to bet? He uses me every day. And if he can use me, even with my personality, even with my flaws, even with my size and all the other characteristics about me that are oftentimes looked at and viewed as weaknesses because they are in many cases, God has taken my life and he's used it in an extraordinary way. And I'm thankful for that. I'm like, Lord, thank you for what you've given me because, Lord, you're so good. And the reality of it is God wants you to live the same way. Now, here's a little formula for how that happens, because it has to start with a mindset. And if you start with the mindset, then you allow God to open up the door to do incredible things. Let me read it to you. Romans chapter 12, verse 1. It says this, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you do what? That you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. In other words, it's reasonable that you would dedicate your whole life to the Lord. It's reasonable that you would sacrifice of yourself to God. Why? Because he gave himself for you. Now that means you're going to be wholehearted about your life to God. You're going to dedicate yourself to him and you're going to say, God, I'm yours. And I'll do anything you want, no matter how hard things are, no matter how difficult things are, no matter how painful things are. If the protesters can say, I'm willing to get arrested, I'm willing to be mocked, I'm willing to go through all of these things for the bigger principle that happens to be a lie, how much more should we be willing to say, Lord, I'm going to make a sacrifice to you. My life will be lived as a sacrifice to you for the truth. God can do incredible things with your life if you're willing to give it all to him. And I can make you this promise. You'll never be able to outgive God. It will never happen. It is impossible. You cannot outgive God. Verse 2, and be not conformed to this world. Don't let the rest of the world drag you into the invisible war that they have no idea they're participating in. But be you transformed by what? By the renewing of your mind, that you may do what? That you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Okay, let's talk about this for just a second. There's a requirement here. When your mind is renewed by God, only then can you be the person that gets to put on full demonstration what is the good and acceptable and perfect will of God. And by the way, the good and acceptable and perfect will of God is the very will that will do something extraordinary with your life. Your life was created with incredible purpose and value. Your life is priceless. So many people who don't even know that they're engaged in the spiritual war, you know what they do? They throw their lives away. But God says, instead of you taking your life and throwing it away, I want you to take your life and give it to me. And then I'm going to do something with it that is unbelievably incredible. I'm going to challenge you to something. If you haven't done that yet, let me challenge you to sacrifice your life to the Lord. And when I say sacrifice your life, that doesn't mean jump off a bridge and say in the name of the Lord. That doesn't mean you run into a bus and Allah Akbar. It doesn't mean any of that. When I say sacrifice your life, live your life sacrificially in obedience to God. Obey God. No longer take your life as your own. Say, God, you own my life now. It belongs to you because I love you. Watch God do incredible things. I can tell you this right now. Sometimes it's difficult to take the steps that we take when we walk with God the way that we do. But the rewards are extraordinary. And the question is, Will you let him do that work? If you will, great rewards are coming. It's exciting. Give it a try, guys. Watch God prove what he wants in your life and watch great things happen. I promise you, it works. God bless you.